Ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us at this point this morning on behalf of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network Asia headquarters based here in the beautiful Sunway City and the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investments, CCSI, may we welcome you to the high-level convening on ASEAN's integrated energy and digital future. Ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN Power Grid, or APG, is a regional initiative to establish interconnected power grids in this region, aimed at enhancing energy security, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability. It is perhaps fitting, therefore, that we begin this morning with a conversation that seeks to address the opportunities and challenges for the ASEAN Power Grid. To begin with the first session this morning, please join me in welcoming Professor Leong Yin Yong, Professor, UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network Asia Headquarters, Sunway University, who will serve as the panel moderator. And I must say, it is indeed a formidable panel. Professor Leong.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for your kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Opportunities and Challenges for the ASEAN Power Grid panel discussion. We are very glad to have an expert panel with us today. Please join me in welcoming Engineer Bunyak Anak Luyung, CEO of SEB Power, Sarawak Energy Berhad, representing the Honorable Datuk Dr. Haji Hazlan bin Abang Hibni, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Energy and Environmental Sustainability, Sarawak. Engineer Bunyak. Next, we'll invite Nadila Shani, Manager of Power Generation and Interconnection Department of the ASEAN Center for Energy. Representing Dato' Abdul Razid Daud, Executive Director of ACE. Next, we welcome Matthew David Winterstein, Chief of Energy Connectivity Section of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP. And now we invite Dr. Feng Liming, Director of Operation and Analysis Division, Global Energy, Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organization, GAICO, representing Mr. Xin Baoan, Chairman of GAICO and President of the China Electricity Council. Ladies and gentlemen, global turbulence from the Middle East unrest to the trade wars indirectly impacts ASEAN through economic channels like energy prices and trade. This underscores the critical need for ASEAN to bolster regional stability, deepen our economic integration, and enhance energy security by strengthening internal resilience and diversifying partnerships. Beyond human-triggered threats, Southeast Asia also faces significant risks from major natural disasters due to its geographical location at the intersection of several tectonic plates and between two major oceans, the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Now, recognizing this dual threat of human-triggered and natural disasters, ASEAN member states must shift mindsets and proactively leverage science and technology for effective mitigation. This unified collective approach is the essential way forward for ASEAN as a family. Let us turn our focus this morning to the ASEAN Power Grid, acronym APG, which you will hear a lot this morning. Now, APG is a regional initiative aiming to interconnect the electricity infrastructure of the 10 ASEAN member states. This slide shows Southeast Asia's current power interconnections. You see that Laos leads ASEAN's electricity exports. It sends out up to 78% of its generated hydropower via 20 connections. The other member states, as you see, have more limited cross-border links. The Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project, which you often hear as LTMS, PIP, stands as the pioneering multilateral power trading initiative in the region. We'll examine the ASEAN power grid today through 3 lenses: the vision, the architecture, and dynamic processes. Our discussion on the ASEAN power grid is underpinned by the ASEAN Green Future project that you heard mentioned just now. This multi-year regional research initiative led by SDSN and Climate Works Center with 9 country teams provides the foundational analysis on decarbonizing technical systems and recarbonizing natural ecosystems. Funded by the Jeffrey Chia Foundation and Climate Works Center, it informs regional policy and strategic foresight through climate policy analysis and net zero pathway development. Building upon this broader framework of ASEAN Green Future, national teams have modeled near zero emissions power systems for their countries by using the low emission analysis platform LEAP and the Next Energy Modeling System for Optimization, NEMO. These reports are accessible on the ASEAN Green Future webpage, with some available now and others being released next month. Building on this, the Malaysian team, collaborating with European Union's Reconnect initiative, is developing an advanced model to optimize Malaysia's shift from natural gas to renewables, nuclear, and storage. This will yield actionable policy and investment recommendations. Now back to the national power sector models. They are now being integrated into a comprehensive regional power sector model. And this integration will allow us to optimize power interconnections and deep power sector decarbonization across ASEAN. This is a synergy previously less explored in the ASEAN Energy Outlook and the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan study aims. Our initial APG modeling approach focuses on the 18 prioritized interconnections identified in the APG plan. We treat existing links as fixed capacity and planned ones as variables in our optimization models. Our ongoing interconnection modeling reveals a divergence in APG prioritization amongst ASEAN member states. While Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Cambodia are actively engaged, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Myanmar currently don't seem to prioritize the APG in their national energy strategies. Consequently, 5.5 of the 18 identified priority interconnections are currently on the back burner. They are the Peninsular Malaysia-Sumatra link, Batam-Singapore, Philippines-Sabah, Thailand-Myanmar, Singapore-Sumatra, and Java-Kalimantan. Ladies and gentlemen, our vision shapes our world. On this APG tree of life, the yellow node at the top represents the vision and the collective will. The roots, these are the roots of this upside-down tree. And these roots control the fruits at the bottom, which you see in the blue node. That is the regional electricity trade, enhanced energy security, and decarbonization. let us now explore the vision of the ASEAN member states, starting with those currently not prioritizing the APG. Indonesia, for instance, is not focused on the APG, but is actively pursuing significant internal grid interconnection projects across 3 distinct island groups. These are number 1, the Batam, Sumatra, Java, Bali group. Number 2, the Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Halmahera, Maluku group. And third, Papua. Similarly, the Philippines, while not prioritizing the broader APG, is heavily invested in strengthening its internal grid connections across its numerous islands, divided into 7 zones. Number 1, Luzon. Number 3, Mindanao. Number 3, Visayas, which is further divided into Panay, Negros, Cebu, Bohol, and Leyte, Samar. For Myanmar, APG prioritization is hindered by significant external and internal pressures. The recent earthquake demands urgent reconstruction, while the government's failure to pay Thai construction firms has eroded private sector confidence. We recommend focusing our APG efforts on ready, willing, and able countries for strategic planning. Given the 2007 APG MOU's extension to 2025 and the successor's challenge of a single vision, we propose that the new MOU allows varied commitment levels and timescales for optimal differentiated progress. This directly brings us to the crucial work being undertaken by the ASEAN Center for Energy. Shani? The ASEAN Center for Energy has been instrumental in developing the highly anticipated enhanced APG MOU. Could you share some insights into the core advancements and what these key changes signify for the future of the ASEAN Power Grid, please?
Thank you very much for inviting ASEAN Center for Energy. On behalf of Dato Razib, our Executive Director, we are very thankful for SDSN and the Sunway University to be here to forge these very important conversations. So just a highlight on answering those questions. I think you outlined a lot of sort of like progress and the visions of the APG. But just to give a context of the cooperations of APG from 30 years back until now, I think the most importantly is that currently we see a changes of narratives. So previously when we started these cooperations, I think it started with the first Thailand-Malaysia cross-border interconnections in 1980s. And upon these collaborations, then ASEAN decided to have that there is a need for utility-to-utility cooperations. That's why we have the head of ASEAN Power Utilities Authorities. So HAPUA started in 1997. So as an outcome of this, we have collaborations between the utilities. We come up with the first ASEAN Interconnections Master Plan study in 2003. So basically aims is basically cooperations between the utilities to look at where are the opportunities to interconnect and what's the benefit. And then I think our electricity sort of like system back then is also quite different, where to realize these planned projects, identified projects, there is a need for higher sort of like political will. So that's why we have the APG MOU back then in 2007. So as an outcome of this MOU, there is establishment of the APGCC, so ASEAN Power Grid Consultative Committee, which is basically the convening of the government to approve these projects, to realize these projects. So I think that's the why we have the MOU at the first place, because this is something that cannot be done only in the utility-to-utility level, but also in the government-to-government. So that's what started off why we have the APG MOU at the first place. almost 20 years back. And I think since then, the changes of drivers is also happens a lot. We see that it was previously, APG is something that is nice to have. So on top of the priorities of the nations, it's nice to have the interconnections for a greater resiliency and reliability of power. But now I think with the transformative changes of the landscape, energy landscape, power landscape in the regions, it's a must to have that. First is to address the energy security issues. Second is to address the energy transitions. So like mentioned by Prof. Sachs earlier, that the country cannot do it alone in terms of decarbonizations. So in order to achieve their climate objective, they need to work together. So we have this renewed sort of like commitment. And then the third is to realize the economic opportunity, basically. So APG is a tool to realize the economic benefits, bringing investment, especially for renewables. So it's a tool for evacuating this untapped economic potential. So I think that what reflects that we need to also renew the MOU. And I think the changes that I can share so far, this is something that we are looking forward for the ASEAN to sign this year. And I think the main changes is it's a greater scope of ambition. So it's not, previous MOU was focusing on cooperations, exploring cooperations, facilitate project by project on bilateral level. But this MOU is expected to have a wider scope of implementations, and then also the outcome that should be achieved regionally. So it's not only complementary for the bilateral effort, but what we want to achieve as a regions. And I think this includes a better regional planning, and then how to mobilize investment for this realizing the projects on the ground, the alignments of regulatory and also policy that needs to happen. So this is basically what are the differences, and I think it has a stronger provisions for implementations. So I think I'll stop with that, and then perhaps we can have a discussions later on.
Thank you, Shani. So building on this understanding of the regional framework, our next question explores how individual member states' energy strategies might intersect with the ASEAN power grid. Sarawak, as you know, is strategically positioning itself within the ASEAN energy landscape, and is marked by both the Sarawak Gas Roadmap and a significant reliance on hydropower. Engineer Bruniak, could you elaborate on any potential strategic interdependencies and potential synergies between these two efforts in enabling cross-border transmission projects and accelerating the realization of the ASEAN power grid?
Okay. First of all, very good morning to the delegates this morning, and thank you for inviting Sarawak Energy Berhad in this session today. First of all, I think I pick up a number of discussion, or the context of the session this morning from Professor Jeffrey and the rest. Yeah, I think it's about the ASEAN power grid connection. I think we will share a bit of what we are doing in Sarawak Energy Berhad, and probably we will also, share with you what we're doing in Sarawak, particularly in the, the Borneo grid. So I also have our, from Sabah, Chairman of Sabah Energy Berhad here. We are doing something in what do you call that, in Sarawak to build our Borneo grid, and actually eventually that will be part of the ASEAN power grid. Yeah, for Sarawak Energy, I think what I probably want to share this opportunity is to also share what what we have done in Sarawak, and what's our direction and where are we in the context of the Borneo grid as well as Asian power grid. But first of all, maybe for the benefit of some of us who's probably not familiar with Sarawak Energy Berhad. So Sarawak Energy Berhad is a vertically integrated power utility company. It is owned by the Sarawak state government, but we run as a GLC. Our vision is to drive sustainability and growth for Sarawak through developing our providing a renewable and reliable and renewable power to the region. That is our vision. Sarawak Energy vision is to be the battery of ASEAN. It's a bit of a big statement to mention, but it is what has been in our vision. I think the professor talked about just now. Now it's COP30. There's a lot of discussion. That I think, but I think the question now is the implementation, and I think that is something that Sarawak would like to share today this morning. So first of all, that is Sarawak Energy Berhad. We are a vertically integrated utility company. We generate. We are in the business of power generation, transmission, distribution, and retail. Yeah, we have a smaller business, but that is what we are. And like I said, our vision is to supply reliable and renewable energy, not only for Sarawak, but it's also for the region. Has been our vision, and I think Sarawak leadership, the state government leadership is also driving, the policy for Sarawak Energy to implement the vision and the mission of the state. So we have a post-COVID development strategy. We are guided by Sarawak post-COVID development strategy to be a developed state by 2030. And one of the key levers to do that is to develop our renewable energy. Yeah, to do that. I think that is who we are in Sarawak. Now, I keep on looking at the at the photo there. We say it's talking about gas roadmap. Actually, gas is a roadmap driven by another agency, Petros. If you hear in the news, yeah, who is working with, of course, Petronas and all that to develop our gas resources in Sarawak as well as in Malaysia. But for Sarawak Energy, I think we started, in 10 years ago, in 2010, we predominantly thermal power generation. And we started on the mission, and we started developing our hydro in early 1980s, actually. The Batang Ai, which is already 40 years old. And then later on, we developed Bakun and Murun, and the bigger hydro that we have in Sarawak. Bakun is 2,500. Initially at 2,400, but we have rated it up higher to 2,500. Murun is about 900 megawatt. So today we are actually predominantly hydro. Yeah, about 60 to 70% of our of our power generation is hydro. Now, of course, we need to look at the energy trilemma: affordability, sustainability, and reliability. We need to look at the security of supply. So we do maintain. We tap into our what we call the resources in Sarawak. It's part of our socio-economic development agenda as well. So in our generation mix, we will always maintain at least 60% of hydro power moving forward, and we also we will have a thermal plant, yeah, gas plant moving forward, and we are looking into biomass and solar and so on. So we want to have a very balanced energy or generation mix. still predominantly hydropower. I think, yeah. So for Sarawak gas roadmap, there are four what do you call it, hubs. If we look at the photo there, they're driven by our other agencies in the state government, Petros. They're looking into carbon capture, utilization, and solution. Yeah, so that is part of decarbonization, and part of the Sarawak gas roadmap is to to adopt all this technology to what do you call that, as part of our commitment to CO2 and climate action and all that. So yeah, yes, we do have gas. We do have, we are still predominantly hydro. We are very much pursuing our other renewable. We continue, we still have much more hydro to develop. We're looking at solar as well, floating solar and land-based solar. Yeah, maybe I stop there for now.
Thank you, Bunya, for exploring the potential interplay between a specific sub-national energy strategy in Sarawak and the regional ambitions of the APG. Now, to gain a wider perspective on accelerating the APG's development, we turn to the extensive experience of UNESCAP in fostering cross-border energy connectivity across other regions. Matthew, drawing on ESCAP's work from Central Asia to North Asia's power system interconnection, what critical lessons should ASEAN apply to the APG? Specifically, how can the APG avoid pitfalls like fragmented bilateral deals or inequitable benefits, while leveraging opportunities like renewable energy trade and grid resilience?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to be here. This is a really great panel to be on. But maybe I should quickly introduce ESCAP, because I think we're not as well known as perhaps some other organizations. We are the Regional Commission for Asia and the Pacific under the UN. We're one of 5 regional commissions covering all of Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. The largest in terms of geography and in terms of population served. One of our core mandates is connectivity. I represent Energy Division, so Energy Division means power system connectivity specifically. And we do quite a lot of work in ASEAN, but as mentioned, we're also working across our region. If you sort of take the region as a whole, an important bit of context is in 2021, our member states endorsed a document called the Regional Roadmap on Power System Connectivity, which sets a long-term vision for an integrated region in terms of power connectivity and a set of principles and strategies to achieve. And so when we think about where the sub-regions of Asia are, we see lots of initiatives and efforts, but among them, differing levels of progress. And in fact, ASEAN stands out as a region where we have seen the most momentum, the most progress, and the most achievement in recent years. If we take Central Asia as an example, Central Asia has a history, a legacy of integration. Then, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, fragmentation. And they're now rebuilding what they used to have. It used to be a fully integrated grid, and now they're only beginning to resolve certain border disputes that have prevented interconnections from being developed in the past. Really, even just in the last few weeks, disputes are being resolved. Whereas in ASEAN, you have now broad consensus that the ASEAN power grid is something that all 10 member states should achieve and would benefit from. In North Asia, the context is different as well. There, the focus has been on how a country like Mongolia, which has tremendous potential for renewable energy, can fit into a very complex and dynamic political context. You have China sitting at the center of the energy transition story. You have Korea and Japan also really playing important roles in terms of, for example, battery production or grids. You have a number of countries that are seeking to achieve net zero in the coming decades, but no formal ability to collaborate with each other. No mechanism in place to enable the actual building of a regional grid. You didn't mention it, but South Asia might also be worth highlighting, because in South Asia, you have something interesting. You mentioned the LTMS. That's the first multilateral power trade in the entire region. That's a sort of remarkable thing if you think about it. In South Africa, you have power pools. All across Africa, you have power pools. Europe, fully integrated. North America, power trade across the entire continent. Latin America has Central American power interconnection. The only multilateral power trade in all of Asia until just recently was the LTMS. But now we have another one. Bangladesh is now importing power from Nepal via India. That also stands out because at the same time that they've initiated this new trilateral power trade, India has stopped exporting power to Bangladesh because of unpaid bills, right? So how is that possible? We have a progress on one side and regression on the other. Well, ASEAN stands out in particular because what you have here is progress across multiple dimensions. And that maybe leads to your questions. How do you avoid the fragmentation that you have, for example, in South Asia? How do you avoid the pitfalls of inequity in terms of how the power trade is distributed? First, you do need a long-term vision and a recognition of mutual benefits. There, I think, as Shani was saying, the narrative has shifted quite a lot. In Central Asia, the conversation for many years was about, we all want to export, but no one wants to import. Right? But of course, that's an impossibility, right? In ASEAN, you did also have that conversation for a long time, but now, no longer. Now a recognition that actually you need both. And some countries now explicitly saying, we really need to import. Singapore saying the only path to decarbonization is to import. And that means there's an opportunity for some countries like Laos, for example, or Cambodia, which have potential to go beyond what their domestic demand would consume, to export renewables in particular. Even Indonesia, as you mentioned, not as supportive of the APG as other countries have been, but now are signing bilateral deals, building capacity to develop solar farms to export to Singapore, but also be used domestically. So that's the thing that's shifted. It's a recognition of it's win-win. Every country, if they participate, has the potential to benefit through multiple dimensions. The equity piece does come back to what are their goals? Where do you sit in the energy transition story? Are you very early stage? And maybe your priority is domestic industrial development. Are you very far down the path? And therefore, where you really want to accelerate to begin to phase down or phase out the coal? Or are you somewhere in between? What's missing right now in ASEAN, and maybe this is where I'll come to a pause, is a mechanism to really enable fully multilateral, multidirectional power trade. Well, you need that in order to fully get these benefits. You need the power to flow from wherever it's produced most affordably to wherever it's most needed. That's missing right now. You have no formalized mechanism for that. You're missing some of the institutions that you need to help manage the process. Those institutions must reflect the ASEAN context. So they must reflect sovereignty, must be consensus driven, but they need to be stronger than the institutions that are in place now, and perhaps we can come back to that. And then of course you need the grid infrastructure to be built more rapidly, which means you need the financing to be available, you need the planning to be more harmonized and integrated, and you need a recognition that all countries must sit at the table equally so they can reap the benefits that they need, that they deserve in a way that's reflective of their contribution to the process. And I think all of these are achievable in ASEAN, but there's a lot of work still to be done. So I'll pause at that.
Thank you, Matthew, for your very interesting international insights. Now, we have just discussed valuable lessons ASEAN can learn from ASCAP's experience in other regional grid interconnection efforts. Now, let's turn our attention to a crucial external actor and their significant advancements in this field. Dr. Feng, China's southern grid has been a pioneer with its ultra-high voltage interconnectors in Yunnan, effectively harnessing hydropower and renewables. As GIGO advances cross-border grid integration, how does this Yunnan Southeast Asia corridor specifically fit in the broader Pan-Asian supergrid? Furthermore, as ASEAN considers deeper grid integration, what specific opportunities and challenges do you foresee in harmonizing technical standards and regulatory frameworks with China under the ASEAN Power Grid framework?
Okay, thank you for your question. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to attend this seminar on behalf of GEDCO and communicate with you. First of all, let's talk about the vision of how China's Yunnan to Southeast Asia power corridor will be integrated into the Trans-Asia supergrid. China Yunnan to Southeast Asia power corridor is a part of the Pan-Asia supergrid and plays an important role in promoting energy security and sustainable development in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia has a fast economic development and a huge energy demand, while Yunnan has more than 100 gigawatts of hydropower resources. The construction of power constructions and the large-scale transmission of hydropower from Yunnan to Southeast Asia can not only meet the power demand of Southeast Asia, promote industrialization and urbanization, but also help reduce fossil energy dependence and carbon emissions, and promote green transformation. At the same time, wind power and solar energy from Southeast Asia can also be sent back to Yunnan, helping the whole region to realize water, scenario, and energy complementation, and improving the stability and the reliability of power supply. The construction of the Yunnan Southeast Asia power corridor in China has a good foundation. China has connected with Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and other neighboring countries through 15 lines. The Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore power integration project has also been completed with a transmission capacity of 1 gigawatts. In the next step, it is necessary to further strengthen the construction of power corridors and gradually improve the voltage level and transmission capacity. China's UHV flexible DC technology can be considered for multi-terminal working to connect China and Southeast Asia countries. In addition, the power corridor can also extend to South Asia and even West Asia to promote the construction of the Trans-Asia supergrid. Second, now let's talk about the opportunities and the challenges of ASEAN-China networking in terms of technical standard and market mechanism. As the unification of technical standards, looking at the opportunities first, China has a world-leading technology and standard system in power equipment manufacturing, energy construction, operation, and maintenance, etc. ASEAN countries can cooperate with China to use Chinese technologies and standards, promote mutual recognition and the interoperability of standards, improve the compatibility and efficiency of interconnected power grids, and reduce constructions, operation, and maintenance costs. Look at the challenges. The power development level of Asian countries is uneven. The existing technical specification and certification systems are different. It is difficult to unify technical standards in short term. As market mechanism coordination, first of all, look at the opportunities. China and Asia have increasingly close economic ties, and there is a huge potential for power market cooperation. The two sides can strengthen cooperation in electricity price formation mechanism, trading rules, market supervision, and other aspects to jointly promote the construction of a regional electricity market. Looking at the challenges, different countries have different regulatory systems for their electricity markets. Some countries' electricity markets are less open. Cross-border power transactions also involve complex issues, such as tariffs and settlement currencies. Governments of various countries still have a lot of work to do in establishing and improving relevant policies, regulations, and regulation mechanisms.
Thank you, Dr. Feng, for explaining Yunnan's development plan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Yunnan has transformed from a backwater of China to a city that the government is emphasizing in developing as the window towards Southeast Asia. And the connection wouldn't just be about power, but on other fronts as well: transport, arts and culture, science and technology. So it's a place to watch for Southeast Asia. So we have explored the APG's vision. But how does this immense, complex vision actually get built? How do these intricate pieces truly interconnect for a resilient energy future? To help us visualize this, I want to properly introduce you to the ASEAN Power Grid Tree of Life. Think of it as a living blueprint illustrating how the APG functions from high-level vision aspirations to tangible results. Let's start at the very heart. In the center, we have the ASEAN bodies and national bodies. They are the core actors and decision makers. The national bodies, meaning the national governments, utilities, and regulators, they represent the operational phase of the APG. They are the people you directly interact with in the day-to-day business of energy. Because this is an upside-down tree, vitality flows from the top to the bottom. So if the overarching vision, the yellow note, is not clear, or the ASEAN bodies don't adequately empower and resource national governments and utilities, regional electricity trade, the desired fruits, the blue note, cannot grow. Now, even in the absence of significant direct funding, ASEAN bodies can empower national governments and utilities by facilitating external financing, convening stakeholders, providing knowledge and capacity building, and fostering policy coherence for a stronger investment climate. Now let's move to the top, the very driving force, the yellow note. It is the driving force behind this entire structure, the vision and the collective will. This is the shared belief and the common aspiration that coordinates everything, the fundamental why of a journey. This core principle also underlies our earlier recommendation to group member states based on their varying readiness, willingness, and ability. Because if you try to reach one vision, it will end up being a compromise vision because there is quite a range of RWA amongst the ASEAN member states. And it's not just about policies and wires. It's profoundly about people. The diverse qualities and collective intelligence that individuals bring to their roles within the central column, from defining the vision, through the coordinating ASEAN bodies, down to the executing national bodies, truly form the APG's guiding spirit. They shape its decisions, values, and future. Behind the tree of life, you will notice a backdrop of 3 partially overlapping circles. These circles represent the different planning horizons and levels of commitment for the APG's success. Starting from the bottom and moving upwards, they signify the short term, the strategic medium term, and the visionary long-term perspectives. This layering acknowledges that different aspects of the APG require distinct strategic timeframes and corresponding levels of commitment. Now let me draw your attention to the 2 side columns. The left shows the coordinating structure and the right driving forces. The notes on the side columns represent the APG's functional aspects. Moving to the left of the tree, we see the foundational principles and careful processes that underpin its growth. At the top left, under fundamental principles, we propose a layered implementation strategy across national, regional, and institutional levels. This begins with the national level foundations, meaning that each ASEAN member state must establish their third-party access agreements amongst national transmission system operators, have clear licensing frameworks for transmission owners and systems operators, standardized connection agreements for new generators, and transmission use of system TUOS agreements to enable fair grid access. Without these, cross-border trade remains fragmented and legally precarious. Next is regional harmonization. Rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all model, ASEAN should align technical standards, for example, voltage and frequency protocols, streamline market mechanisms, for example, day-ahead trading, and adopt flexible regulatory reciprocity, allowing varied domestic policies to exist. Now, this leads us to our key principle. Harmonization is not equal to uniformity. Countries retain control over domestic grids but agree on interoperability rules. And finally, the institutional backbone. This involves establishing the ASEAN Transmission System Operator Institution to coordinate cross-border power flows, developing an ASEAN energy trading platform for transparent auctions, and implementing robust dispute resolution mechanisms to build the essential trust. Now look at the right side of the tree. That column focuses on aims, the resources needed, and how we put things into action. Our overarching aims demand strategic harmonization, not just legal, but technical and trading rules. ASEAN's current project-by-project approach, as seen with past initiatives like the LTMS PIP, is inefficient and slow. Systemic harmonization will allow future projects to plug into pre-agreed rules. This will significantly cut development time and build the necessary groundwork for an integrated ASEAN power pool and a unified ASEAN transmission system operator. To achieve this, we need resources that enable scalability, allowing the APG to grow from initial bilateral interconnections to sub-regional networks, and ultimately to a full integrated ASEAN power pool to maximize the use of renewable energy across borders. Now look at the Go node. That node represents active implementation. That is establishing the ATSO institution we just mentioned, securing financing for cross-border interconnectors, and developing innovative tools like the ASEAN Renewable Energy Certificate. Finally, the ultimate work, the blue node at the bottom, that is the fruit of the APG tree of life, regional electricity trade. And this can lead to enhanced energy security and decarbonization across ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, this APG tree of life isn't just a diagram. It's a dynamic blueprint for growth. The APG's success hinges on pragmatic harmonization, not centralization or imposing full market liberalization. By systematically addressing legal, technical, and operational barriers, ASEAN can unlock regional electricity trade while respecting national sovereignty. The tree illustrates how vision, principles, processes, and actions interconnect, working in harmony for ASEAN's sustainable energy future. Now, the real work lies in bringing the vision to life, especially given the existing complexities and fragmentation of the region's energy landscape. It's precisely this challenge that the ASEAN Center for Energy, in partnership with USAID, addressed with their playbook for ASEAN Power Grid Interconnector Feasibility Studies, released last January. So Shani, considering that this playbook outlines a roadmap for accelerating APG's interconnectors, yet ASEAN's energy landscape remains fragmented by differing policies, infrastructure gaps, and national priorities. From the vantage point of ACE, what do you see as the single most critical enabler to transform the APG from an aspirational vision into a fully functional multilateral power sharing system? And how can ASEAN overcome the biggest institutional or technical roadblock standing in its way?
Thank you. I'm a very visual person, so I really appreciate that you put in a very visual manner of how complex it is and how the interlinkages between different sort of like sorry, the stakeholders that needs to be involved, and how it should be a bottom-up and also top-down approach iteratively. So just to connect to what you've presented on those diagrams, I think before we are talking about trade, I think for the APG it's simple. You need to have the infrastructure. So the transmissions, cross-border interconnections needs to be there. And I think how this infrastructure gets built, I think it comes down to 2 points. First, that you need to have a cooperations, either it's between B2B or utility to utility, to explore these new projects and gets approved by the government. So I think there's a tricky part on the approval process of if you want to have this cross-border interconnections project, because from the government point of view, that you need to make the case why this is beneficial to us, why we need this, what's in it for us. So I think partly that needs to be addressed. So that's why a feasibility study is something that important piece to make the case and to convince that this is beneficial for the business or the utility. So I think that's what we are trying to also help for the ASEAN member states to deliver this, to make the case basically through a feasibility study. So there are also a lot of considerations, like you mentioned, this complex challenge is countries wants to also have the priority agenda in their nationals, how they want to transform or like develop their power systems, and part of like this regional. So there's also prioritizations of projects. So in order to help that, I think that's the role of the institutions like ASEAN entities, whether it's ACE or HAPUA or others, that can sort of like bridge these gaps. That's the first. The second, how this infrastructure get built at the first place is, if that's approved and there is a case that this can be built, techno and economically feasible, then how this can get it financed. Because I think in order to have cross-border interconnections, there are different types, right? Like the utility to utility, the business to business, and there are sort of like long subsea cables that perhaps need to be built. And then basically how to get it financed, it needs to be bankable, and it needs the risk needs to be properly allocated. And for several types of the cross-border interconnections, this needs a financing facilities or facilities to help alleviate this sort of like political risk and other risks as well. So, and then the second is to have how basically if this cross-border interconnections get needs to the investment needs to be recouped, right? So what kind of business models for the transmissions needs to be there? And I think this is where the alignment needs to happen, because different countries, like you mentioned, they have different electricity structure, jurisdictions, and regulations as well. So enable to have negotiations, for example, for PPAs, how this structured and arranged, I think countries in bilateral level needs to agree and to to compromise or like to adjust within their jurisdictions. So that's the first of like how the infrastructure get built. The second, if we are talking about trading itself, how we step beyond from the bilateral trading to multilateral. And I think LTMS sort of like showcase that is possible for like different parties to join together to have a broader trade utilizing the existing infrastructure. So we're in a more well interconnected ASEAN, like Mekong and up to down to Singapore. I think there's we need to think on how to optimize the line utilizations of the existing infrastructure on top of the bilateral things that they have currently. So what in order to have this, we need basically institutions like you mentioned, how to set the exchange platform, the trading rules, and what kind of settlement and then technical and also regulatory needs to be in place. So I think we are aware of that challenge and what the sort of like the building blocks needs to be there. And I think this is a momentum where we have this MOU to facilitate all of that. So I think that's sort of like overall answers that I would like to give. Thanks.
Thank you, Shani, for highlighting the critical enablers and the critical roadblocks for the APG's transformation from vision to reality. And your insights also emphasize how achieving this must involve robust regional bodies and mechanisms. So to delve deeper into what these robust bodies and mechanisms would look like, and drawing on the wider global perspectives again, we'll now turn to ASCAP. So Matthew, based on ASCAP's analysis of successful cross-border grid initiatives, what specific regional bodies or mechanisms should ASEAN prioritize to ensure the architectural robustness and operational efficiency of the interconnected APG in the coming years? Additionally, given your active role in capacity building for ASEAN energy regulators, could you shed light on the most significant challenges you have encountered in this crucial endeavor?
Yeah, thank you. I think I began to touch on this a little bit in my prior answer, but it's really important to dig into it more deeply. And maybe I'll tackle this question from two perspectives. What does ASEAN need at the regional level? And then what needs to be done at the national level? From a regional perspective, ASEAN stands out as having institutions in place that are already playing a really important role. So you have ACE, of course, which sits really at the center of all of these conversations, as well as the APGCC. You have the HAPAWA, the utilities, and their counterpart for the regulatory side, the ASEAN Energy Regulatory Network. So you have, and of course you have ASEAN Secretariat. So you have these institutions that are already playing really important roles. The two questions that sort of have to be considered are, what more should they be doing that has not already been done? And what are the gaps? And with relation to the gaps, should the existing, are the existing institutions sort of fit for purpose for filling those? So one, of course, is, as was mentioned, just the power trade piece. As I mentioned, there's no mechanism for multilateral power trade. If you look at how it works in other contexts, you usually have some institutions sitting somewhere, either above the countries as a regional institution, or one country acting as a platform for all the other countries that enables the power exchange. So for example, on the latter example, India's energy exchange is open to neighboring countries to participate in. So Nepal, Bhutan utilize the Indian power exchange as a way of managing their cross-border trade. Whereas in Central America, you have a formalized institution fully responsible for taking on that role. In an ASEAN context, the question is, does one of those two models fit? Or is there some third model we should consider? One idea that has been floated, and this links to what you were saying about not needing every country to move at the same speed, would a more distributed approach be appropriate? Is it possible to create an exchange that does not sit either at the center of all the countries or sit within one country, but that allows a more modular approach? I think this would need to be discussed and defined in more detail, but it's an interesting idea that's worth exploring. Then there are the non-negotiables. They're the things that you cannot avoid. You mentioned harmonization versus integration. Security sits at the core of all of these conversations. No matter what we want to achieve, we know that the lights need to stay on. This is something you raised earlier in your remarks. Right? You can't avoid the fact that the point is to produce power and deliver it to consumers. And if you fail in that goal, nothing else really matters, right? If you look at how this is managed in other parts of the world, you usually have some central body that defines standards that all participants agree to. In North America, you have NERC, which used to be voluntary, and I think now it's more and more mandated, but it covers all of the United States, Canada, and part of Mexico. Right? So it is international, and it does play a role in both trying to reflect the realities on the ground in such a way that every utilities context is taken into account, or defining a minimum set of standards that can serve the purpose of everyone achieving reliable delivery of power. So you probably need some kind of an institution in ASEAN context to do that kind of definitional work and that kind of work with the member states to make sure it's reflective of realities and that they have the capacity to implement. Maybe that's a good segue to the national point. What do the countries need to do? All the countries have their own institutional frameworks. They all have the utilities in place. Some have independent regulators. If they don't, they have a ministry overseeing it. They all have bodies that play certain roles in making sure that the power system is planned, implemented, built, costs are recovered according to national priority. Right? They're not all at the capacity level they need to be truly be integrating into the power system at the ASEAN level. One thing we've been trying to stress more and more from an SCAP perspective, it's very easy to separate the cross-border conversation from the domestic conversation, but you need both. If you do not have a strong domestic grid, cross-border connectivity will have limited benefit to you. At the same time, if you focus only on your strong domestic grid, you will miss an opportunity to keep your costs low, to diversify your power supply. So you need to have both of those conversations at the same time. So we're beginning to do more work at the national level on this topic. But with the regulators in particular, we see them as a really underserved community in the ASEAN. The utilities have played a strong role in driving this forward. It makes sense. They are the ones building the infrastructure and delivering the power. But the regulators have the responsibility to make sure that all of that development is done in such a way as to benefit the consumers and to make sure it's in line with national policy objectives. So if a country says we need to achieve net zero by some year, who is making sure the utility is actually planning with that in mind? It's the regulator. So one of the things we've been doing more and more is capacity building for regulators. There are certain issues that they're all facing that are common. What do we mean when we say harmonization of standards? And what role do regulators play in achieving that harmonization? And also I should say, and I want to say thank you to Sunway University for hosting this. The other thing we've noticed is that there's a need for stronger institutional building that the regulators can participate in. So we have the concept now of establishing an ASEAN School of Regulation. We're doing this in partnership with ASEAN Secretariat and with the UNOPS ETP program. ACE is also involved. And the idea is to create a formalized institution where all the regulators can come together and learn what they need to learn to both achieve the ASEAN power grid, but also meet domestic needs. What do they have to do to serve their own communities better? We're testing this out this summer with the summer school. I think it's really exciting. It's modeled, for those of you who know the European context, after the Florence School of Regulation. This is not a new idea, but new to this region. We've been very pleasantly surprised with how much support we've been getting from all stakeholders on this. The key question, I think, that will be at the core of the summer school is to what extent are we going to focus on the deep technical issues that all the regulators are facing? Or to what extent is it more about the institution building we know we need to do? And probably it's going to be a bit of a balance of both. But I think one of the conversations that continues to happen in an ASEAN context is how do institutions at the regional level interact with the national institutions in such a way that they're all feeling like their voices are heard and that they're not being stepped on, that the institutions of the region are not enforcing something at the national level that they're uncomfortable implementing, or the countries are not implementing things that are in conflict with the regional goals. So that's going to be, I think, where we end up our conversation, where our conversation will end up this, as we say, summer, it'll be in September. But the idea is to really sort of build towards a mechanism to deliver on all the things that we know regulators have to be delivering over the coming years. I'll pause at that.
We look forward to learning together with you through the ASEAN Summer School of Regulation. And you mentioned that you're now having more conversations with countries to encourage them to to think about both domestic and cross-border interconnections. What kind of responses are you getting from Philippines, Indonesia, and Laos?
Every country context is different, right? So it really depends on where they sit. Laos is a good example of a country which clearly has a stated strategy of building for export, and they've been very successful in that. What they're missing is a really fully unified, integrated domestic grid. So despite having tremendous hydro potential, more than they can consume domestically, they are still import dependent during certain times of the year. So for them, the question is, how do you build up domestic capacity to serve both needs at once? How do you build for export and also serve domestic communities? And that means, for example, moving away from the generation export model that has been dominating that part of the region for so long, and moving more to a utility or balanced model of interconnection. For the Philippines, because they will say this, they are probably going to be the last to integrate, simply because they're so physically far away. They nevertheless have many lessons they would like to share with the rest of the region about how you get private investment in grids, which they're one of the few countries to allow. How do you create a competition within the power system, which they're, again, one of the few countries in ASEAN to allow. To your earlier point, it is not about every country meeting the same level of market restructuring or having the same exact type of model for market implementation, like they have in Europe, for example. But what are the best practices we can take from each country and then bring them to the region as a whole? And what regional practices can help inform domestic development?
Yeah, right. Philippines could actually serve as a case study for the rest of ASEAN because it itself is so distributed and diverse. So how does this country harmonize and integrate within itself would have key learning points for the wider ASEAN. So now we turn to Sarawak, who is a critical player in the Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines East Asian Growth Area, BIMP-IGA. Considering the broader architecture of the ASEAN power grid, could you share Sarawak's perspectives on the current momentum and key priorities driving the BIMP-PIP? What tangible indicators help Sarawak gauge the BIMP-PIP's progress and its potential to contribute to the overall robustness and efficiency of the interconnected APG?
I think for Sarawak Energy and for the government of Sarawak, as I said earlier, our vision is to, provide reliable and sustainable energy to the region. So with that, I think we are in support of, the broader discussion of the ASEAN power grid. And I think I can also share that we are very advanced in working the Borneo grid, which will be part of the ASEAN power grid. So if you see the earlier map showing the ASEAN power grid up to Peninsular Malaysia and Singapore, that will be linked to Borneo as well, and then from Borneo to Philippines through BIM. Yeah. So we have the interconnection with East Kalimantan since 2016 in Sarawak. So we export to Kalimantan since 2016. So we talk about a lot of discussion on interconnection. So for Sarawak, just to share with you, we have that interconnection with East Kalimantan. So that's working very well. Both sides are very happy with that, and we will continue with that. I think there is discussion that we can expand if we can. So that is our experience. And as we speak, before end of the year, we will have a full interconnection with our, with Sabah. The chairman is here. It is and it is what they call that a challenging endeavor because we have to build our transmission grid and interconnection as mentioned earlier. We need to invest and be committed to do that. So because of our vision and mission, we get the support to do that. So we will have interconnection with Sabah before end of the year, hopefully sooner than end of the year. Challenging area, logistic, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and we are also in feasibility, looking at the feasibility of interconnection with Peninsular Malaysia. Yeah, there was earlier study during the earlier time there was an interconnection with Peninsular Malaysia. So we're looking into that feasibility of interconnection with Peninsular Malaysia as well. Brunei as well. We've been in talk with Brunei for, and actually we are ready to interconnect with Brunei once we have all those regulatory matters and so on and so forth. And basically the if like a better word, the political will on the other side. So as part of BIM, we want to facilitate the interconnection with Borneo, Indonesia, Kalimantan, Brunei, and the Philippines. Yeah, and then of course we also we have completed the technical feasibility study of interconnection with Singapore. We are well into the commercial negotiation with Singapore. So there'll be interconnection with Singapore. We are into the at the stage in the commercial negotiation now, and that will pass through, of course, Indonesia. So we have to get the support from Indonesia as well. So that why we're doing all this, it is because we want to see Borneo to be part of the ASEAN Borneo grid. We are developing the Borneo grid to be part of the ASEAN power grid, and I think, like I said just now, it's already happening for Borneo since 2016 in Sabah, and then in what do you call that, in Brunei, and from Sabah we can connect to the Philippines. Yeah? So that is that vision as well, to interconnect with the Philippines through Sabah. Yeah. So going back to the ASEAN, we will we are looking into the interconnection with Peninsular Malaysia, with Singapore as well. I think that is what we can share from Sarawak. So essentially, we are very much driving the Borneo grid to be part of the ASEAN power grid. And on the other thing that what we're looking at, we talk about whether to export or not. I think for us, we want to diversify our market as well, because that in Sarawak we have one of the lowest tariff in the region. So to support, because that is our kind of like obligation for the state, but to support our business, we need to diversify our income as well. So we're looking at least 15% of our revenue to come from export. So that is driving what we're doing and the direction that we are going for Sarawak Energy. Okay.
Thank you, Bunyak, for bringing a voice from Borneo, helping us to feel the pulse of how Borneo is moving ahead with the BIM PIP, which is an important part, which is an important sub-regional network that will contribute to the ASEAN power grid. And whilst thinking about this BIM PIP, it is also important for Borneo to think about the climate risk on these coastal power infrastructure, because a lot of power infrastructure is on the coast, and East Malaysia in particular, because of its exposure of its long coastlines and low-lying areas, faces a lot of risk when in sea level rise, earthquakes, and so on. And the power systems, they underpin a state's license to operate as well as lives. And SEV being a very government-linked company, its role is in development. So as the government's role, the role is not just in economic and political achievements, but actually in ensuring the safety of its people.
Okay, maybe if I can comment on that. So, like I said, in 2010, we are predominantly a thermal generation, where we have a gas power plant in Bintulu, and I think we have a coal plant in Kuching. But then 10 years later, we are now predominantly hydropower producer, meaning to say 60 to 70% of our generation now is hydro. We develop our large hydro, adopting the international community of large hydro safety, I call, and also the hydro sustainability standard. So our generation has actually, gone into the very interior of Sarawak, yeah, like in Bakun. It is almost quite close border to Kalimantan. Yeah. Likewise for Batang Air as well, and likewise for Murun. So what that means is we had to invest a lot on the, as mentioned just now, we need to invest a lot on the transmission. Yeah, bringing the power from interior Sarawak. Used to be coastal, as you said, 10 years ago, but that has changed over 10 years through development of a hydro power plant, hydro plant. But yeah, of course, the challenge is to bring all that power, even to export to Peninsula or Singapore. We had to invest on our, the grid, yeah, from 275 to 500 kV and so on. So there's a lot of investment. That's why we said, just now I mentioned that we have completed the technical study, to export power to Peninsula or to Singapore. What we needed to do to build our grid. The other thing is also we are leveraging on our hydro power resources in Sarawak. As we said just now, to provide reliable power to Sarawak as well as to the region. So for us, it is very clear. Our direction is clear. Our commitment is clear. Our conviction is clear. And I think we probably one of those who can share that actually we are doing it now. It's happening for us in terms of power interconnection, and we will get the support of AS and all that for us to connect to the bigger Asian power grid. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Buniak.
Yeah.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, realizing the full potential of the APG, particularly requires securing necessary infrastructure, financing, and technology, and this often involves engaging with major global partners. Currently, ASEAN member states often engage these partners bilaterally to advance the APG. Now, turning to Geico, with your extensive global experience in driving energy interconnections, Dr. Cheng, what significant advantages in infrastructure financing, technology transfer, and policy alignment could a unified ASEAN negotiating bloc unlock for the APG? Furthermore, what tangible benefits might this collective approach offer external partners such as China in fostering regional energy interconnection?
Okay, thank you for your question. Geico believes that if ASEAN cooperates with major countries outside the region as a unified subject, will have a huge positive impact on both sides. ASEAN will receive greater support in investment and financing, technical transfer, and policy coordination. In terms of infrastructure investment financing, ASEAN has a huge market and development potential, which has great attraction to major countries outside the region. But large-scale power projects form a high-quality project library and promote to major countries outside the region. At the same time, member countries' policy formulation and coordination will under unified framework can avoid investment risks caused by national difference in policies and regulations and sudden changes, thus enhancing investor confidence and attracting more large-scale investment. In terms of technology transfer, ASEAN as a large market, its unified demand for advanced technology can promote technology owners to transfer technology more actively in exchange for market access and the long-term cooperation opportunities, and also help them to seize the first opportunity in implementing ASEAN unified technology standards. In terms of policy coordination, ASEAN can give a stronger voice by negotiating and operating with major countries outside the region in a unified identity. And a huge both sides to jointly formulate more reasonable and mutually beneficial cooperation rules and mechanism in tariff, electricity market, and other aspects, so as to strive for more interests and development space for ASEAN. Major countries outside the region will also gain greater opportunities. In terms of deepening economic cooperation, China and other major countries outside the region can gain more and better investment opportunities in power infrastructures. In terms of raising technical cooperation, China and other major countries outside the region can cooperate with Asian countries to jointly carry out power technology innovation, research projects, research and develop technologies and equipment more suitable for the Southeast Asia and promote the common progress of technology. In terms of enhancing regional influence, China and other major countries outside the region will strengthen cooperation with ASEAN in the field of energy and power, and participate in regional energy policy formulation, power market rules establishment, and other works. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng. So if ASEAN engages with an external partner as a bloc, external partner can actually optimize across a wider region instead of a country by country basis. This is the same idea as trying to optimize the interconnections across this entire region. So thank you, panelists, for that rich discussion on APG's architecture. Now, we recognize that the APG's architecture is shaped by complex dynamics that requires deeper case-by-case analysis for informed decision-making. So what does this mean in practice? Consider a power system with significant hydro, gas, and coal, aiming for substantial renewable expansion and grid flexibility. What would be the paramount considerations for pumped hydro storage in this scenario? To provide genuinely helpful insights here, the analysis must cover aspects such as optimal asset sequencing, grid integration readiness, strategic investment and site selection, construction, and funding models. We launched the ASEAN Resilient Grid Capacity Building Program in March this year. This initiative, in partnership with GEICO and supported by MISTI, aims to help national utilities answer questions such as those. And it's precisely with such a utility in mind that we now turn to Engineer Brunyak. So given Sarawak's substantial 5,745 megawatt generation capacity, predominantly from hydropower, gas, and some coal, with solar at just 1%, could you outline its strategic roadmap for expanding its renewable energy portfolio, including incorporating pumped hydro storage and enhancing overall grid flexibility?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I can share a bit of an update on what we are doing now in terms of our roadmap to expand our generation transmission, the Borneo grid, and then to the wider Asian power grid. I think the other thing that I just want to share is that we are also collaborating with our Indonesian in North Kalimantan to develop a hydro plant there. Yeah, that is at the front end engineering. Yep. Now, as mentioned just now, in terms of our generating capacity, we are about 5,700 or about 6,000 megawatt. By 2030, we have to our target is to increase to 10,000 gigawatt by 2030. That is our target, as directed by the state as well. And by 2035, we have to achieve 15 gigawatt. Then, yeah, so that is our target. But how do we get there? Yeah, we have hydropower, we have gas plant. We have 3 coal plants, but we're not going to build more. They will be phased out. So we had to diversify our renewable energy, not just hydro. So we're looking at floating solar, large scale solar, land scale, large or land LLS, land or large scale solar. So we commissioned our first floating solar end of last year at Batang Ai plant, hydro plant. I think it's the biggest floating solar in Malaysia, 50 megawatt. Yeah. We've also commissioned a battery energy storage system, BESS, in Kuching end of last year. That is 60 megawatt. And then we are looking at, as shown here, pump storage. Pump storage has potential to complement all those intermittent. So if you have a storage system, then you'll be able to build more of the intermittent like solar. Yeah, and our strategy of developing hydro is to minimize the impact on social and environment. So meaning to say, we don't want to build a very large hydro that will inundate people and relocate people. Our strategy now is to develop run-off river. What do you call this? Cascade hydro. So like you see we went to Danube River. You see Cascade River from the mountain all the way to the Black Sea. It's run-off river. So that is our strategy, developing hydro. And they are not, in terms of plant capacity, not a full, as a large hydro. In terms of firm capacity, you have higher percentage, like 100%. But if it is smaller hydro, run-off river, the firm capacity is less. So therefore, you need to have a storage system in your system to support all the intermittent as well as the not so firm power, like our cascade power or solar. So going back to solar, yes, in terms of achieving our 10 gigawatt by 2030, we plan to at least build 1,000 to 1,002 megawatt of solar, both floating solar and land, large-scale solar, land solar. And as I said, we have commissioned our first floating solar in Batang Ai, end of last year. It's in operation now, 50 megawatt. We have 1,000 more to go towards 2030. So it's a lot of work for us. So we get, of course, we get people who are coming in to make the proposal, do the feasibility, and so on and so forth. Like in Murun, we are working with Mazda, an investor from Middle East, and Gentari to do a feasibility of 250 megawatt floating solar in Murun. We're also doing that for Bakud. Yeah, maybe another 300 megawatt in Batang Ai, another 160 megawatt, and a few land-based solar. But in future, beyond 2030, we need to do more. So as we speak, I think there is a study. There is a study done by Australian National University saying that Sarawak has large potential for pump hydro storage. we took note of that. I think we're looking at that now. Actually, we are working at 2 pump storage, feasibility of 2 pump storage in Sarawak. But there will be more, but we are focusing on 2 now. Yeah. So why do we need pump storage or battery storage? That will enable us to do more of the renewable power, the intermittent power like solar and so on and so forth. Yeah. So for us, we have to work towards the 2030 target of 10 gigawatt, 15 gigawatt in 2050. It will be a mix of combined cycle plant. I think as we speak, we are now building one combined cycle plant, 1,500 megawatt in Bintulu. But our overall plan is to always maintain at least 60% of our generation mix renewable power to ensure that we have security of supply. There'll be years that we get, water level low, so we need to. Generally, a lot of rain in Sarawak, but you do get, time where the water level can get low, so you cannot just rely on one water source. Okay, so I think that is our roadmap, that is our plan. We also looking at biomass. We're piloting one biomass plant, 10 megawatt, very soon. We're looking at other renewable energy like wood pellet. We're doing some technical study and to see how feasible those. We know that in Europe, wood pellet is one of those, renewable energy generation mix. So I think that is a bit of where we are in terms of solar energy, what we need to do and what is our target moving forward. And with that, we hope to be able to, share that resources with our region, with with Kalimantan, with Sabah, with Brunei, with Singapore, with Peninsular Malaysia, and then to the bigger Asian grid. And we hope to position ourselves as a battery of Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Bunyak, for your insights into Sarawak's renewable energy roadmap. Now, ladies and gentlemen, state and national visions are, of course, shaped by the broader regional landscape. Looking ahead, with the anticipated signing of both the enhanced APG MOU and the new ASEAN Framework Agreement on Petroleum Security (APSA) on the horizon, we must consider the interplay of these critical frameworks. So our next question for the ASEAN Center for Energy is, how does ACE envision these frameworks strategically complementing each other to bolster ASEAN's energy security, considering the distinct roles of electricity and petroleum? Furthermore, could you provide an update on the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline (TAGP) project and address potential synergies or conflicts between the continued focus on petroleum and gas security through APSA and TAGP, and ASEAN's long-term decarbonization goals?
Thank you for the questions. I think in answering the questions, we need to zoom out a bit on the energy security issues in ASEAN. So I think energy is vital for our growth in terms of realizing the economic potential. I apologize on that. Sorry. So I think in terms of we need to have the affordable energy to realize our economic growth. And I think in ASEAN level, we need to have sort of like a strategic moves and plan how to do that. First is, I think in correlations to APSA, I think this is a framework for, I think, more into like mitigations measures. Because I think currently if you look at our energy mix in the ASEAN itself, we are oil and gas is still like 50% of the overall energy system, and this is contributed to the transportations that we still use a lot of oils, but also for gas for power and also industries. So we know that the efficiency is there to reach carbon neutrality and do decarbonizations, but at the meantime, to sustain our economic growth, we cannot deny that we still need these commodities or fossil fuels. And I think for the APSA, this is like I mentioned, this is a short-term strategic measures, mitigations measures. So in order to avoid sort of like the risk for this uncertainty, the global political thing, especially on oil and gas, if there is any emergency, that we need to have a sort of like emergency response measures in order to secure our security of supply for petroleum. So I think this is what APSA is all about. So this is preparing the worst case if we need a emergency. So how the countries could help each other in terms of securing oil security of supply. That's for the APSA on petroleum. But for the gas, I think the resources in ASEAN is diversified, and some countries really have the resources of gas and see that as their transitions fuel. So some countries that has gas wants to utilize it as part of how they transitions before do a very deep decarbonizations on power. So I think as a transition fuels, this is important for us to have a strategy on how we utilize, maximize the utilizations of the gas resources through the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline. So basically, this is sort of like quite similar on the APG side, how basically we could enhance the gas infrastructure in order for us to utilize it together. So it includes the building of the LNG infrastructure and also regasification terminal. So this is part of the master planning for TAGP as well. So, but if we are looking the whole package of the energy security, in conclusions, in short, that we see APSA as sort of like short-term strategic measures on how we maintain the sort of like emergency. And then TAGP is somehow the strategy on a medium term of how, while we are sort of like transitioning and do deep decarbonizations of this energy system, TAGP is one of the strategy in the midterm period on how we gonna utilize gas as the transitions fuel. But and the APG itself, which is, I think, it's a long sort of like process on building and equip the more grids capacity to basically evacuate or utilize that renewable power. So I think we see it as like a short term measures, medium measures, and the APG is like long term for we are to fully sort of like achieve the energy transitions in the ASEAN.
Thank you, Shani, for giving us this time perspective on this oil and gas agreements and the APG. Now, Matthew, while the ASEAN Power Grid is designed to enhance energy security and resilience through interconnectedness, under what specific circumstances could these interconnectedness paradoxically undermine these very goals? Crucially, what are the optimal design and implementation strategies for the APG to unequivocally enhance energy security and resilience, ensuring its consistent positive contribution?
Yeah, it's a critically important question. As we were talking about earlier, reliability is non-negotiable, right? We need to make sure this is serving the purpose of delivering low carbon power reliably to all consumers. And I think one of the challenges in the ASEAN Power Grid is you have a development approach which has risks associated with it. So if you just have a small level of interconnection with your neighbors, your risks are relatively low. You're not exposed to a significant amount of potential spillover effects if your neighbor has an outage. As you begin to increase your interconnectivity, though, you're exposed more and more. Then there's a point, though, where you begin to reap the benefits of diversification. So my increased interconnection with my neighbor allows me to import when I'm deficit and export when I have surplus. You know, it's sort of a remarkable thing. We can look at what's happened in the Iberian Peninsula. Spain and Portugal just had a big outage, right? And it's sort of remarkable. We still don't know exactly what happened. One thing we can say with some confidence is one of the issues they faced was an inability to import as much power from the rest of Europe as they needed to import to keep the lights on during that moment of disturbance. So you want to be interconnecting to the level where you have a greater benefit of interconnection than you have potential risks. At the same time, there are many, many things you can do to mitigate those risks. One way to think about this might be through the lens of how Singapore is approaching its bilateral deal. We already heard some of the work that's going on with Sarawak. If you look at how those deals are being structured, there are specific requirements for how those projects must be built that go beyond just I'm delivering energy to my neighbor. You have to have a carbon limit below a certain threshold, not zero, but low enough that you can't just build a gas turbine and export that power across a border. You need to have an availability requirement high enough that you can't simply build a solar farm and export that over your border. And you need to deliver certain system services. The generator must be able to provide services to the grid beyond just typical energy, ancillary services, flexibility, et cetera. So you have to think very carefully about the technology choices in what you're building and the operational characteristics of that choice. Even the grid choice matters at that point, the interconnector. That makes a lot of sense if you're Singapore and you're focusing on rapidly increasing your imports without undermining your level of security. But what it leads to in the long term, if every country did the same thing, is a much more inefficient ASEAN power grid. If you go project by project and put every project as the maximum level of reliability and maximum level of service deliverability, you will have a very robust grid and you'll spend a lot more than you need to. And then the question is, who bears those costs? Ultimately, of course, it's the consumer. So we need to be very cognizant of the fact that none of this is for free. So I think that when we think about the ASEAN power grid in particular, there's a couple of things we have to keep in mind. One, going back to what I said earlier, you need to be thinking about the mechanisms for multilateral, multi-directional power trade, which are currently absent. But what that really is talking about is flexibility. Flexibility of where the power is coming from and where it can be delivered to. Without that mechanism in place, you run the risk of focusing on certain corridors and delivering power across those corridors and not being able to respond in case of an unexpected event or to uncertainty. You have to be able to respond to uncertainty. That has to be part of the process. The other bit of flexibility that has to be built into this is the diversity itself. You can't simply build a interconnector and say we're done. You have to build many of these, many, many more than the 18 that are on the priority list. And that means doing more regular integrated planning, doing more collaboration among the regulators in terms of how to actually ensure these projects are built both for domestic needs and fit to purpose for the ASEAN grid as a whole, like the school we were talking about earlier, playing that role. And you also need to be thinking very carefully about where the financing is coming from, and making sure that you're financing these things in such a way, these interconnectors in such a way that you're actually appropriately sharing the costs across all the ASEAN member states. That's maybe the point I'll close on. And this is, it seems separate from, but it really is relevant to security. Right now, there's no mechanism for a third party to be involved in a bilateral interconnect. Thailand and Malaysia upgrading their interconnection right now. That has potentially profound implications for Singapore and eventually Indonesia. You want to build that interconnector as large and as robustly as possible because it enables that north to south power trade. But there's no way for Indonesia, Singapore, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines to be involved in that Malaysia-Thailand interconnect. We need a mechanism so that we can plan and build these fit to purpose, not for the bilateral needs, but for the ASEAN.
Thank you for opening our minds to how we can think about these interconnectors in this wider and deeper ways. Okay, before I come to you, Dr. Fung, let us open up to the audience and invite your questions or your views, please.
Hi, I'm Yijun. I'm a high school student from Malaysia, but in the fall, I'll be studying at Columbia, hopefully economics and sustainable development. So my question is for Dr. Fung from GuideCo, or perhaps Mr. Matthew, because it builds upon what you were just addressing just now, is that China seems to be playing a key role in driving that interconnectivity in the ASEAN power grid. But it seems as though China itself is facing huge problems regarding its energy security. First, driven by an increase in demand because of its population, its heavy industry and transport sector, and then who knows with AI, the intensive uses of energy coming from AI. I think electricity consumption is outpacing the annual GDP growth of China as well. I think it sits at 6.7% to 5%. And then also combined with another pressure coming from China's own environmental pledges under the 14th five-year plan. So to peak emissions by 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2060. And yet China's own energy mix encompasses a 55% share of coal. So how do you think that driving that interconnectivity, opening up the grid to the ASEAN countries will exacerbate those energy security issues or work to benefit the overall goal of achieving security as what Mr. Matthew was pointing towards just now? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And China has the largest power grid in the world, and the power demand is increasing very fast. And how to make sure our power grid can work very normally? There aren't blackouts in the recently more than 40 years. So why we can do this? Because we have more than 1 million power works to work together and work hard to ensure. And secondly, we have the strict rules to make sure the power grid to work normally. And we want to reach the zero carbon emission in 2060, but now we have more than 55 carbon power. But the increasing rate of the renewable energy is increasingly faster and fast. In the last year, more than 0.3 billion renewable energy integrated in the power grid. So our carbon plant is dropping very fast too. So we can make sure that we can reach the aim at 2060 year. We can get the zero emission power system. So the experience can be used in the ASEAN power grid. I think it's not a problem because there are too many hydrogen power plants can be built in the Asian countries. And the hydro pumped energies can be developed too. So if we can work together, use the Chinese rules, Chinese standards, and equipment manufacturing system, I think this can be done very perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Feng, does Matthew want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that was well said, and this is a really good question, so thank you for raising it. Maybe just to take it from a slightly different perspective, you have already an ASEAN, it's expanding, right? So Timor-Leste will be joining in the coming months or years. You have already discussions with Australia about becoming part of the ASEAN grid through exports to Singapore. You have, of course, already existing interconnection with China's southern grid. Then you have things which are already discussed through things like Greater Mekong Subregion. You have BIMSTEC, which includes South Asia, and discussions about India and South Asia interconnection through Myanmar and Thailand. So you have many processes in place, but what you don't have right now is a link to the ASEAN processes. And so I think that ultimately we need to sort of ask the question, what is the long-term centrality of the ASEAN power grid in helping to bring these conversations together? Or is there another set of mechanisms that need to be developed to have these other complicated processes coordinate with each other? Because of course, as we discussed earlier, there's also NAPSI, right? So North Asia, China going north and east is also really important. You have Central Asian processes that maybe at some point could be integrated into Southeast Asia. I think that at SCAP, we try to play this role of bringing these conversations together, but the point you're making is incredibly important. There's no commonality in terms of how they're approaching their development pathways. And so maybe as a starting point, we need to be doing a little bit more work just to say, how does it all add up? And would we be better off bringing it more together more rapidly so we're not diverging in the long term?
Thank you, Matthew, for your valuable international perspectives.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, for sharing with us your views as well as vision. I am Sharifah Nurkamsia, consultant on innovation and nuclear power. I noticed that a lot of focus and interest is on putting the renewables onto the ASEAN power grid. However, as Matthew, you rightly shared with us with regards to blackout in Spain, Portugal, and southern France, there was some explanation by experts that this could be due to the overwhelming renewables that is being fed onto the power grid. So, and there's a study by the mathematician in the University of Nottingham that says that if there's too much renewable on the current power grid as used to base load, then it would cause great the grid destability as well as blackout. So as ASEAN is coming forward and very, I think you were saying, very diligently coming with the APG, do you foresee, distinguished panelists, that the focus should not only be renewables, but the nuclear power should all be part of this narrative in order to ensure of the grid stability? Secondly, Professor Jeffrey Sachs has mentioned 1.5 lower target has been reached last year, and the higher target is 2.0, which is supposed to be 2050. But now we are already 26 years before that. We've already reached this, and I think it takes less than a few years to reach 2. So do you foresee there is an urgent need for political leaders to move this goalpost from 2050 to a more realistic date so that mankind is protected, the earth is in good shape, so that when we are discussing about decarbonization, it's no longer 2050, which I think is too far ahead. And we know with AI and data centers, the surge in power consumption is very high. So there needs to be some realistic take in, I think, moving the 2050 goalposts. Otherwise, I'm not sure what will happen to us as well as the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farida. Who would like to respond?
I'll say a couple of things, maybe. To the first question, I guess I'm not convinced renewables are an issue. I don't actually think the evidence is there to say that that was the problem in the Iberian Peninsula. And you have many, many countries that have very high shares of renewables that simply are operating their power systems at a very high level of reliability. That's not to say nuclear shouldn't play a role, but it is to say it's part of the solution set, not the only solution. And so if you think about ASEAN in particular, where you don't have any nuclear power plants in place, right? Even if you pushed really hard and started to build today, we know those won't come online in the near future. So to your second point, if we want to accelerate decarbonization, can nuclear play a fast enough role to offset the emissions growth that we know we need to offset? Maybe, but it's not demonstrated yet. My view is we really should be pushing forward with all the solutions we have, which means pushing forward with renewables as rapidly as possible. We know that they can be deployed quite quickly. Solar farms in a year, wind farms in a year and a half, right? Battery systems, a similar time frame. It's not either or, but at the same time, every country needs to make an active choice now. This goes back to the point that Professor Sachs was making earlier. We need to have that long-term vision. If nuclear is going to play a role in the long term, you need to set the groundwork for that today. So absolutely, countries that want to use it should, but you can't simply say, if we have one, we don't need the other. We actually really need all of them to be working as fast as possible. As to whether we should increase I mean, we are ambitious on the target or not, it's not really for me as a UN representative to say. I would simply say that number came from a negotiated process through the Paris Agreement. There are ongoing processes. They could be more effective, but ultimately it's up to countries to decide what they think that global target should be and how we should achieve it.
Hello guys, my name is Amber Chua. I'm from Sunway College JB and also the founder and chairman of Malaysia Environmental Pioneer, an NGO. They focus on the beach cleanup and also Save Our Sea project. We do education project at the primary school about plastic pollution and how to save our ocean. So right now I have a questions. We collected 400 kilogram rubbish, ocean rubbish, and Majlis Perbadanan Penggarang. How they dispose this trash, right? They open burning and they use EM, a chemical to cover the smell. So for this kind of ocean trash, right? How can we generate it through sustainability strategy? And could it be possible to be one of your biomass kind of like renewable energy for our nation? Because if let's say education doesn't take place in primary school, in our college, in the community, people keep on throwing the rubbish and government keep on open burning. Do we really solve the issues of climate change? No, right? And how can we collaborate with our NGO and your company for beach cleanup, and how to do the sources of the main root cause of the problem? Categorize your trash into paper, grasses, plastic. Because in this 400 kilogram ocean trash, right, 85% plastic. And the plastic was discovered in the fish. Microplastic in the research is real. What can we solve this problem? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any ideas about plastics? How we can actually... Okay, thank you. Thank you for your sharing. Okay, Dr. Kala, she has the mic.
I know. Oh, thank you so much, Wawe. First of all, congratulations to Sunway University, Jeff Sachs Center, SDCN for spearheading APG. But just like Prof. Sachs said, 30 years of talk, and yet, the action has been so slow. Case in point, 2 years ago, Malaysia announced that we could export our renewable energy to our neighbors 2 years ago. It made a lot of commercial sense to many companies. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon. The B2B was there. The infrastructure was there. Proposals were sent to the Petra. It died there. So I think we need to engage with governments and maybe how do we get governments to get the right policies in place so that we can work faster than this 30 years of talk. Thank you, YY.
Thank you for sharing your views, Dr. Kala, and your call to action. Okay, we have times is up, and we will need to close this panel now. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our hardworking panelists, and thank you very much to the audience for your time and interest.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, food is the most important source of energy for the human body.